We sit in these labels that people have called us for years, and it becomes our identity. I said it once, I'll say it again. It becomes our identity. And so much so that we start losing focus of who we actually are. So who are you? You guys have instructions. You can fill it out. It doesn't have to be immediate, but just have it to me back before the end of class. And we will put it into a time capsule. And I'll lock it. And then on week 4, we will open it up, and there is a thing that we're going to do with them. Okay? But what you're going to be writing down is pretty much anything that anyone's ever said about you, good or bad. Things that you think that you are, right? What is your identity? And so, like I said last week, Casey opened up and shared her heart. And she said something that really stood out. It was, I don't know who I am, and I'm still trying to figure that out. And that spiraled me for the past week. Don't ever start a lesson like midweek. All right, at least wait till Saturday, because like the whole week was like stuck in my mind. And I started replaying everything that people had said about me. And some of them hurt, you know? Some of those things hurt. And so you guys are writing on a shirt, all right? And maybe. And so the question really becomes, who are you, right? Who really are you when the labels fall off, when you don't know who you are, or when you feel lost, right? When you're completely by yourself, who are you? So write down who you are, no filter. You can be lost, you can be a mother, a friend, you can be sick, you can be alone, you can addict, whatever it is. Keep writing them on there, and then you'll just fold them and put it into the box. And then just write your name on it so I know how to hand it to you. I won't read them, I promise. They're just for you. And while you're doing that, I did this. So it's a little bit bigger. It's a little bit more broad, but this is my version. So we go into church and we wear these fancy suits, or we look nice. We got our plaid on, right? Depending on the day. But when we come into the church, sometimes we're carrying things that people can't see, right? We're seeing pain. We're seeing heartbreak. We're seeing loneliness. We're seeing things that people had said about us that made us feel awful or made us feel small, right? And so when I say no filter, I mean no filter. Whatever people have said about you, by the end of the 4 weeks, it's time to let that go. That's how we move forward. Do you guys, I'm going to shut their door real quick. All right. You guys ever watch Kung Fu Panda? Jack Black, Kung Fu Panda? So in that, he's talking to his mentor, and his mentor says something that really stood out. Now, this isn't biblical, okay? It's Kung Fu Panda, Jack Black, but it stuck to me. He said, you're too worried about what was and what will be. He said, yesterday was history, tomorrow's a mystery, but today is a gift. And that's why they call it the present. And sometimes we get so stuck in who people said we were that we forget to realize who we actually are. So that's what this lesson's on, okay? So as we're talking, you guys can write those down. But let's start, before we start with this verse, I pulled one up. So John 8:36, if the Son sets you free, you are free indeed. How many of you guys heard that verse? That verse stands out to me every single time because sometimes you feel like you're trapped, right? You're trapped in the old ways, or you're trapped in the addictions, or you're trapped in the heartbreak. And so with that comes this sense of imprisonment. And what he's saying is, if Jesus truly sets you free, you are free indeed. And what that means is there's no turning back at that point. When you look at Sodom and Gomorrah, right? She turned And she looked back, and he told her not to look back. But she looked back, she became a pillar of salt. Salt, right? Why salt? We become salty sometimes. That's what they say these days, right? I know I'm salty. And what that really means is we're still holding on to what was, and we're not moving into what is. And sometimes we get stuck worrying about what will be. Now I sound like I'm talking in parables, all right? So let's look at Genesis 25, verse 26. It says, "Then the other twin was born, with his hand on Esau's heel. So they called him Jacob, meaning grabber or deceiver. Isaac was 60 years old when the twins were born." I don't know if you guys know the story of Jacob, but it's actually really interesting. And for some reason, when I was in the mountains, I was reading through Genesis, and I did not realize that 50% of Genesis is talking about the story of Jacob. If 50% of that whole book is about one person, I'd say it's pretty important, right? But for some reason, when we think of Genesis, we think of Adam and Eve. We think of Noah, right? We think of, who's the guy that was thrown in prison? Joseph, right? We think of them. But we seem to forget that Jacob was a main part. And what it really does is it sets up the identity of who Jacob is and what his people will be like. And so the story of Jacob starts off with twins, okay? They were having kids, and there were twins that were going to come out. Now, when someone would come out, this was going to be his first son, right? When someone comes out and they are the first son, in those times, you would get what was called a birthright. Birthright, and also a blessing for your life. So when they're talking about Jacob grabbing someone's heel, that means to like trip someone up. Like he's trying to come out first. Like he's fighting to be the first one. And it's crazy to think that a kid would know that he needed to come out first, right? Or that he desired something that small, because he knew what it would lead later. But Esau came out first, not Jacob. And as he was coming out, he was grabbing his heel. Now, right there, you see two labels that were given to him at birth: grabber, deceiver. If I came out and someone was like, "Hey, you're a deceiver," like, that doesn't seem like a very good name, you know? And then they labeled him a thief. Why did they label him a thief? Why did they label him a liar? Why did they label him a deceiver? As he started growing up, Jacob started doing things for his own gain. And so there was this time where Esau was hunting, and he's running through this field. When he comes back, he's exhausted. Now, Jacob had been cooking this whole time, and he's like, "Hey, give me some of your stew." And then he's like, "Give me your birthright, and I'll give you some of the stew." And he says, "What's good of a birthright if I'm about to die?" So he gives Jacob his birthright. Trickster. Now, Jacob knew what he was doing, right? And Esau was too young to realize what he was giving up. He didn't realize what it truly meant, or he didn't care. But Jacob did. And the older that he got, the more that started to bug him. Now, his father became blind. Isaac. Isaac was the guy that was supposed to be sacrificed on the hill. Remember that? But God said, "I'd send a lamb." So Isaac is sick. He's in bed. He's about to die. He's blind. And he says to Esau, the firstborn, "Go out and hunt. Cook me some of my favorite food. Bring it to me. Feed it to me. And I will bless you." Remember, there were two things that were supposed to be given: a birthright and a blessing. Now, the whole family kind of seemed disarray, right? See, Isaac loved Esau, but his mom loved Jacob. And so there was favoritism in the house, right? And so Jacob's mom heard what he had said to Esau. And she says to Jacob, "Go grab me one of the animals. I'm going to cook your father some of his favorite food. You need to go in there and say, 'Hey, I've gotten this game for you. Eat, sit up and eat, and give me my blessing.'" And Jacob's kind of like, well, he'll know it's not me, because see, Esau was hairy and Jacob was very smooth. All right. Well, the mom was like a deceiver. Like she was like, hey, well, don't worry, put on some of his clothes. The smell will smell like him, and we'll put some of the animal skin on your hands so it feels hairy. Now this is in the Bible. These are people that we're supposed to be looking up to, right? But these are deceivers. These are people that make poor life choices, right? These are people that are getting labeled as they're being born and they're moving through life. And how many of us have gone through something like that where we make a choice and we're like, should I have done that? Right? But Jacob does it. Jacob goes and he starts making the meal, getting dressed. He goes to his father and he says, sit up and eat the stew that I've cooked for you. And he says, which son is this? Like Isaac knew something was off even though he couldn't see. And he's like, it's your, here, actually, I have it right here. So it says, Jacob said to his father, now this is Jacob speaking, I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you have told me. Please arise, sit and eat of my game, and that your soul may bless me. So he's being a deceiver here. He's being a liar here. He's being a thief because he's taking something that is not truly his. And so his father starts he's like, give me your hand. And he's feeling his hand. And he's like, it sounds like Jacob, but it smells and feels like Esau. And so he's not trusting his senses properly. And so what's happening is he eats and he gives this beautiful blessing to him. Now, the second that he does this, Jacob goes back to his mom, and his mom says, hey, you need to go live with my brother for a little bit because Esau is going to be very mad and he's going to try to kill you. Now, Esau comes back and he gives the same thing to his dad. And he says, hey, sit up and eat so that you can give me my blessing. And he said, who is this? And he's like, it's your son, Esau. And he said, I just gave a blessing to my son, Esau. He said, your brother has deceived me. And so, they're singing in there. It sounds pretty good. Anyway, sit up and bless me. And his father knows that he'd just given the whole blessing. And he tells him that he did it. And Esau is angry. He's like, first he took my birthright. Then he took my blessing. Just give me some kind of blessing. And the blessing that he gave Esau was not that good. It was that he was going to be a servant to his brother Jacob. Because he knew that once he gave that blessing away, it was from God. It was something that God intended to do. It couldn't be changed. Okay. So, throughout the 20 years, he's living with his father-in-law, trying to wait out Esau's anger. And through that time, now he gets deceived. He falls in love with one of his daughters, and he says, hey, I want to marry your daughter. And the brother was like, hey, well, if you work for me, how many years is it to you to marry my daughter? And so he says, 7 years, and I can marry your daughter. So he starts working the fields as a shepherd, and here, this one's for you. He starts working the fields as a shepherd. Now, he had 2 daughters, right? His mom's brother. And he fell in love with one, but after those 7 years of working, which seems so short because he was in love with this woman, he sets him up to marry the other one. He's deceived. And he gets mad about being deceived. But what's funny is he wasn't mad when he was deceiving someone else, right? So he has to work another 7 years because the firstborn has to get married first, and she was the secondborn that he fell in love with. Now, through that blessing, he was blessed to have kids and multiply and build a generation of people. That generation of people would be known as Israel later on, right? Now, we all know the story of Jacob. We all know the pain that he carried for years because of the labels that were given to him. How many years have you sat in your labels, right? As I was writing this shirt out, I didn't realize how much pain each story, each word has, right? If you really look at it, this is what people have said I am. There's good, there's bad, but it's all this this story of labels that have been given to me over time. And I know the same thing has happened to you. Now, some of those labels look like mother. Some of them look like son, grandson. But some of those look like deceiver, liar, thief, addict, heartbroken, lonely, right? And the longer you hold on to those, the harder the battle becomes to get rid of them. And so it's finally time for Jacob to go see Esau 20 years later, after stealing his birthright and after stealing his blessing. And he's paranoid. He should be. He should be paranoid. He stole something from him. Has something ever been stolen from you? So he's walking and he's trying to divide up his kids with different women so that way that like they'll be a little bit safe, because if he comes to attack them, he has to at least have some left, right? So instead, he starts sending all these gifts that he's acquired over time because he started taking things from the father, but he was working for them, right? And he had acquired so much money and sheep, and he started becoming, I guess, strong in his blessing, which was given to him. God always had his back, even through the bad choices. Now, he sends them over the river and he stays back, all right? And he's left with just himself. All the things that he had, all the people that he was with, he finally had time to isolate. And isolation can be scary because when you sit alone, you're left with what? Your thoughts. And in this case, he was left alone, and an angel came down, and he had to wrestle that angel till daybreak. He's wrestling with God, and how many times have we actually wrestled with God? Are you there? Do you care? Why do these things happen? How many times do we wrestle with God? But he's actually wrestling with someone, so much so that God breaks him. He wrenches the socket of his hip just by touching it. Now, I mean, he's still fighting, but like the pain is now there. The pain of everything that he's carried, right? And you might be like, why would God break someone? Because you can't build someone up until you break them down, right? Why would God do that? If you look at that bottom line there, it says, because he was running on lies. And as much as we don't want to look at it, we run on the same thing. Now, you might not be a liar, but you might be lying to yourself about who you are, about all the things that people have said that you are. And you're running on these things and on these fumes and on this hurt and on this brokenness. And like for weeks, I'm trying to teach you guys to share the gospel. And when I was sitting in Tennessee, I feel like I still needed something, and I didn't know what it was. And God said, they need to work on them. Because if you don't work on you, how can you fill a cup if yours is not full? If you're sitting at half full or even bare minimum, right? You can't fill other cups. And so you really have to look at who your identity is, right? And so through these lessons, and I'm sorry, you're not going to like these lessons because they're intended to break you. They're going to break me too. And so the first question is, if the pain keeps you still, who are you when you're actually in motion? Now let's break that down. If the pain keeps you still, how many times have we been in so much anguish that we feel like we can't move? Like we're stuck in the same battle, the same heartbreak, the same dreams, the same hurt, the same pain. And it keeps replaying and replaying and replaying to the point where we don't know who we are. And God says, move. He says, follow me. He says, trust me. But we're paralyzed. You ever heard of fight or flight? Some people fight when they're angry. Some people run away. But there's also that one that they talked about in 5th grade that no one knew about, but now is now a thing. It's called freeze. The freeze response. And I feel like a lot of us get stuck in that freeze response. We're a deer in the headlight. So I want you to take in that question. If the pain keeps you still, who are you when you are in motion? Now, let's talk about someone that really matters. All right, Jesus. Jesus can set you free. If the Son sets you free, you are free indeed. Okay? But he came from an area called Nazareth. Now, Nazareth didn't have a good reputation. He didn't have a good reputation. He came from someone that, like, they thought, like, she probably cheated on her husband, and, like, this kid came out that doesn't look like the father, right? Because he looked like a different father. And so Philip is so excited to start following Jesus that he says to one of them, he says, hey, like, you have to come see him. And the guy's like, well, where's he from? Like, who is this guy? And he said, oh, he's from Nazareth. And the quote was, and this is from the Bible, can anything good come out of Nazareth? When we have all these labels that are weighing us down, sometimes in our brains, we think that same question. Can anything good come out of me? Can anything good come out of you? It hurts to look at because the lies that people have been telling us start becoming our identity. But Philip answered it really interesting. He said, come and see. Because sometimes you have to visibly see the change. You have to see that something good can come from Nazareth, right? That something good can come out of all of the pain that we've carried for so long. But Jesus was labeled. He was labeled demon-possessed, a threat to Rome, a false teacher, a blasphemer, a friend of sinners, illegitimate, a nobody from Nazareth. And you know who labeled him this? His own people. Now, we surround ourselves with what we call friends, and our friends call us things. Mess up, stupid, idiot, don't know what you're doing. Why do you keep trying this? You're going to fail. You're a failure. And like I always say, we served a God that's been there. But like sometimes I don't think you realize that he's been there. This is the guy that was working miracles, raising people from the dead, setting people free, bringing people closer to God, starting a whole new thing. And he was labeled crazy. False teacher, demon-possessed, blasphemer, friend of sinners, illegitimate, a nobody from Nazareth. But that same nobody from Nazareth went onto that cross. And what's funny is the people that he was with still don't believe him to this day. You know what their name is? Israel, the Jews. They don't believe. Some do. Let's be honest. Some do. But most of them do not believe that he was truly God. They say he was probably someone that just started a revolution in Rome. But you know who did believe him? The nobodies. The ones that people said were fallen. The ones that people said were lost. The ones that were illegitimate. And so we have these labels on. What are your labels? You're writing them down, right? We're going to put them into a box. By the end of these lessons, we're going to take these labels off. That's the whole point. Well, let's keep moving forward, right? Here's another one of those questions you get to look at. If every label about you was wrong, who are you? We sit in these labels that people have called us for years, and it becomes our identity. I said it once, I'll say it again. It becomes our identity. And so much so that we start losing focus of who we actually are. So who are you? Really? Because when I was writing these labels, man, my heart was wrenching out every single one. It hurts. It does. But the thing is, why do we let the world label us anyway? The world denied Jesus, hung him on a cross, and didn't realize that he was the Messiah. Why would we trust people that are lost and hurt and broken? We live in a broken world. So why is it that these labels that are given to us make us feel so small? Make us feel like this is who we are as a person. Now, last week, we kind of talked about Job. And if you know the story of Job, you know that he was given some labels. They're a little bit different than Jesus, right? He's a blameless man. He's blameless. He's perfect. He still maintains integrity. He's one that fears God and shuns evil. But that was just the start of the story. You know, it's like verse 1 and like verse 2 are these things that God is saying about him. It's not what the world was saying about him. I mean, maybe they were. His friends really liked him. His wife really liked him. He had everything he could possibly want. But see, Job was an example. And the devil wanted to say that Job, the reason he was so good was because nothing bad ever happened to him and that God was protecting him. And God wanted to show off. He said, you know what? Test him. And he'll still be each one of those things that you see there. Now, again, if you follow the story of Job, now that everything that had been given to him was taken away, 10 kids, right? I can't read half of these. Severe depression, servants killed, house collapsed, lost his wealth, chronic pain, felt abandoned, lost his reputation, friends accused him, wife discouraged him, community shunned him. He lost all of his things. All those labels that God had given him ripped away. They're given and they're taken. And he had to sit in all of that. We have the identity of father or mother. What would happen if the kids were taken away? Who are you? What would happen if all of your possessions were taken away? What if all of your labels taken away? If you know the story of Job, you know that he overcomes them and God restores him tenfold. But the loss of a child hurts. I lost one. So we're going to loop back to the story of Jacob. Now remember, he's wrestling with God all night. And finally day breaks, and the angel says, you have to let me go. It's daylight. And he says something to him. He says, I won't let you go until you bless me. Now, when I think of blessings, I think of monetary gain, maybe money coming my way and falling from the sky. I think of maybe a healthy relationship showing up. I think of a peaceful life, maybe a little less heartache. That's probably what he was looking for too. Maybe he was hoping his brother wouldn't kill him. A blessing. And the blessing from Genesis 32:28 says, and he said, your name shall no longer be Jacob. Pause. Your name will no longer be deceiver, liar, thief. He says, but Israel, for you have struggled with God and with man and have prevailed. He renames him from liar, deceiver, thief to someone that struggles with God. And you might ask yourself, how is that a blessing? If you look at the rest of the Bible, you see the same parallels. Now, this is 50% of Genesis, but it's the entire story the rest of the way. You have Israel, a nation that's rising, all of Jacob's descendants, who struggle with sin, idolatry, right? They fall away from God, they come back to God. They struggle with God. They fight wars all the time. They struggle with men. But the blessing is hidden at the very end. And you have prevailed. We have struggled for too long, and we hide inside of churches with things over us when we're carrying weight. When we're carrying labels of what people say that we are. And until we're able to take these off, until we are able to take off the labels and move into something new, right? We'll never know what God's blessing is, because at that point you have not prevailed. This is what God says that we are: perfect, blameless. How many of you actually believe it? The problem is we trust our thoughts and we trust people more than we trust God. Point blank. I do the same thing. I'm not trying to call you out because I've been there. All right? But if we keep trusting the labels that people have given us and the things that are written on your paper there, you'll never move into God's promise of actually prevailing. And how many of you are just tired of the struggle, you know? Like constantly going through the same battle and hoping that it's going to be different, but no one told you that hope sets you up to be let down sometimes? Yeah, hope is painful. But God gives us hope for a better future, to prosper us, to prevail. And we see it throughout the Bible that Israel is constantly going through the same struggles with God and with man. The name is fitting, right? So here's another one of those questions. Who are you if all your labels get taken away? Honestly, if everything fell away, all the heartbreak, the hurt, the pain, the negative things that people have said about you is taken away, do you even know who you are? I was writing these out, and I'm writing lessons that are gut-wrenching me. And the answer to that question for me is no. I don't. See, because we're going through life on this treadmill, right? And we think we're going somewhere, but it just keeps keeping us in the same spot. And God says, get off of that and now walk, right? We think we're doing everything right, and we're trying to keep moving forward, but that moving forward is still keeping us still. And the voices are loud, the ones that are negative, but most of them are projecting the pain that they feel too. Half of these labels that people have called me, ugly, fat, broken, too loud, right? Astray, are probably the same things that they're feeling, and they're projecting it onto us. And we're letting the world name who we are. Why? When the world doesn't even know what it is. And this is going to get me canceled, but it is what it is. We have people in schools that think they are cats. Furries. Lost people are naming us. Why? Sometimes we name ourselves. Oh, I can't do it. I'm too broken. I'm too hurt. I'm too lost. I don't know who I am. Sometimes the labels are given to us. One of the labels for me was Skechers, right? We were poor. And Skechers were the only shoes that we could afford. But everybody had Nikes. I never realized where my addiction to Nikes came from. Trauma. I was beat up. Rocks were thrown at my head. I was always told I wasn't good enough. What happens when those labels fall off? Who are you? That's what we're going to find out. And today, you're not going to get a new name. All right? I asked. And I wish that I could give you a new name today. But I can't. But what I can tell you is that you're His, that you're loved, and that you're wonderfully made. He cares about us. He does. But we're so stuck in these labels, we can't even see his promise for our life. And it hurts. How much time we got? We got there. All right. I'm tired of sitting in pain. I'm tired of struggling. And I've been fighting with God too long, hoping that things are going to get better and then just keep letting myself down. Because I'm not trusting who he says that I am, Wonderfully made. I don't feel like that. Never have. But he says that I am. And at some point, I have to stop trusting my thoughts and I have to start trusting him. Because he's the only one that can name us. He's the only one that matters. Life is so short and futile, right? And we have eternity with him. Eternity is forever. Life is short. You have to take the labels off. Look at your papers real quick. I want you to read who you think you are. Maybe some of those, but if they're taken away, who are you? And I'm not trying to hurt you guys by having these lessons, but I'm telling you they're gonna hurt. And I think it's what we need. Because we can't properly share the gospel of a God if we can't honestly say that we trust who he says that we are. You have been hurt. You have been attacked. Some of you have been molested. And that is not who God said you are. Wonderfully made. God, I thank you for the opportunity to teach to your sheep today. God, I thank you for sending your spirit into this place to help change their hearts. God, I ask that you let it sit in and that you are able to change their name of who they think that they are, God. We have struggled for too long, and God, we are just asking for your blessing. We know that comes with pain, but it has to be better than this. God, we trust you, and we thank you for sending your son. And in Jesus' name we pray, amen.